All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Terry Lucas, the director of the Shelter Island Public Library, and welcome to our very special Friday night dialogue. Just a few housekeeping tips before we start. In this webinar format, all the participants are muted. So if you want to ask a question or you want to have some sort of issue, type it into the chat box and I'll keep an eye on it and I'll try to help you if I can. I will monitor both the chat and the question and answer, so you can put something in either place, just type away. The program is being recorded and will be available on the library's YouTube channel a little bit later tomorrow. And once again, thank you for coming out. And I'd like to introduce Bob Lipsyte, who will tell you a little more about Jules Feiffer. Bob is an author, a retired sports columnist for the New York Times, and writes the Codgers column for the Shelter Island Reporter. Don't miss that column. Bob's a great supporter of our library, and we are always honored and pleased to welcome him back. Bob?
Thank you. Well, I'm very honored to be here, and this is another good reason to be a great supporter of the library. Thank you so very much. I'm here with
Jules Feiffer. My name.
Jules Feiffer, that's right. Jules Feiffer, who thinks he needs no introduction, but that's only so that he can start talking sooner. I think that who Jules is will reveal itself in this hour. He is just had his 92nd birthday. Because this is all about me, he's the biggest inspiration in my life because he goes to work every single day, sits at his easel. He's writing a new book, a graphic novel for kids. His recent artwork is on display at Keys Art in Sag Harbor. His play, Man on the Ceiling, recently played in Bay Street. And he is a screenwriter for which he won an Oscar. He is a playwright. And in the time in which he first emerged in the 50s and into the 60s and 70s and 80s, he was considered the most powerful and best known political and social satirist in America. But that was then. Let's talk about now. Jules, you know, you've told me as a kid, this is several centuries ago, but when you were a kid, you believed in the American dream. Now, my question really is, do you still believe in it?
That's a very good question, and it keeps changing. The last 4 years, as we all know, was not just a challenge to the myth of the American dream, but a challenge to what this country is, what we've been lying to ourselves about what it is, what it may become both for good and bad, and raising the question that hasn't been raised seriously for many, many years. Is this experiment going to work, or is it over, or where are we going? And it's, thank God I'm 92 and I don't have to answer those questions, and I won't be around a hell of a lot longer to deal with the effects. Although there's reason for a lot of encouragement, and there's a reason, you know, I was born in 1929, which was a few weeks before you, Bob. And I lived through the Great Depression as a boy from the Bronx in New York, when the Bronx was very different, and grew up as a New Deal baby in the height of the Great Depression, still believing optimistically, always believing optimistically in the American dream, which was that it was all going to work out, that this poverty, this people selling apples on the street, long lines of people out of work, all of this was an aberration. It was always going to work out. And that's what just about everybody believed in, or everybody I knew believed in. And this mythology was what ruled our lives, and in many ways governed our ambitions. So we moved on and we moved forward, and no matter the countervailing evidence, no matter how many stories came out and how many realities happened to prove this was an illusion, we kept holding on to that dream. And the question now is, all these years later, in my case, some 85, 80 years later, since my political consciousness and social consciousness began to be raised, what can we go on believing in? And it's, but as an old fart, my views really don't count anymore. It's just, my observations may count, but my views really don't. Have I answered no question that you asked?
Jules?
Beg your pardon?
When did it start to turn, do you think?
I'm sorry.
When did the dream start to fade?
Bob, I can't hear you.
When did the dream start to fade?
I think,
for a few minutes.
well, I think it's the dream held fast, no matter the degree of disillusion, up until Donald Trump was elected president, and from that time on, we were confronted with a new reality that really might have been the ugly part of the old reality, which we were allowed to ignore because it hadn't surfaced for so many years. In other words, with Trump's election, all of those people who were hiding out in the closet were given license to come out of the closet. All of the people who despised what all the rest of us loved about America, which was its volatility, its dynamics, its excitement, its music, its art, its culture, all of the things that excited us and were a threat to these others who lived underground and were hiding out until they could have their dream come true, which was to say the N-word in public and be celebrated for it. And that's the time.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The things, the ugly things that Trump helped us see, the racism, the sexism, the xenophobia, all these things have been a part of American life, since the beginning of American life. It was always there. I mean, do you think there's any possibility he did us a favor by making it more vivid, making it in our face?
What he did was bring it out of the closet in a way it had not been since, except in certain regions of the country. I mean, in the South for years it continued, and still continues in some ways, in some segments. But where racism was simply taken for granted, where anti-Semitism and the detestation of minorities who were there to work for you, but not to be paid well, not to be recognized, not to be, what Trump has brought to the fore is the romance of a white-only country that was fading and has faded, and historically simply is going to fade. And this is the rebellion of that white-only country, and Trump is its patron saint. And what all of this battle is about is a dying breed that won't die. And in order not to die, it'll take the rest of us with them. And how we come out of that, the next 5, 10, 15 years will tell. But, I'm optimistic on some level. But again, I'm an old fart, and my views really don't count. It's what the young people and the younger people are doing, and what they represent and what they are insisting on is what is essentially going to determine where we go from here. And I see a lot of good stuff in that, and a lot of positive stuff in that. But at the same time, you can't overlook the fact that at our core, from the very beginning, there has been the ugliness we see at the forefront today has been there always. The racism we have seen there, and the bigotry, and the detestation of any of the others who aren't like us has been there from the beginning. What Trump succeeded in doing in his 4 years is turn it into a modern romance. Turn it into the American, he's converted the American dream into that racist dream, that sexist dream.
Let me read something that you said to me 3.5 years ago at the island.
Did I know you 3.5 years ago?
Well, whether you did or not, I wrote it down.
You
Trump
mean stuff
winning
I said to you 3.5 years ago? You write down?
3.5 years ago.
I didn't know you were keeping a record of our conversations.
Well, this was so controversial and powerful that I had to write it down.
Oh, I go right ahead. In the morning, I'm calling my attorney.
Mm-hmm. I am your attorney. Don't be silly. Listen, just be quiet and listen. Quote, Jules Feiffer at the Islander, June 8, 2017. Trump winning was better than Hillary winning. It could lead to resistance, change, revolution. Hillary and her people were clueless, didn't listen to anyone. They would have governed the country with the same arrogance they conducted their campaign. Do you think that there is, what I want to hear is that, was there any value in the country, half the country, waking up to see what was coming out of this closet? Well,
First of all, I deny that quote. I deny saying that to you 3.5 years ago. I deny knowing you. This is the first time we've ever met, actually.
right.
But
and it's a pleasure. I'm really glad to meet you.
well, I hope it will turn into a pleasure for me too, but not with that quote.
Don't count on it.
Let me see if I can frame that in a way that I can get away with my answer. Hillary, who I had long admired and also long fret over, was this liberal anomaly who off stage, and I met her when she was the wife of the Arkansas governor, whose name you may not remember, but my friend Roger Rosenblatt had a party in New York when Hillary was still, when Bill and Hillary was still in Arkansas. And I met her when we talked, and I thought she was incredible and terrific and smart and not like a politico at all, or a politician's wife, which is what she was at the time. And I just, immediately got a crush on her. And then we met several other times on Martha's Vineyard. And I felt the same way about her. She was funny, she was smart, she was bright. And the only time she wasn't all of those things is when she was a public figure. And the public figure I saw when she was campaigning was another Hillary. And I came to the conclusion over the period of time when she was a very able senator from New York, but also quite 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 a bit stiffer in public than she was in private, that she was surrounded by these male advisors, every one of whom was making her work against her best instincts and her natural abilities, and were um, creating an image of a public Hillary that was at odds with the excellent private Hillary, and the public Hillary was who people didn't like and didn't want to vote for. And it was a shame. But what I was afraid of is when she got elected president, as I was sure she was going to, she would surround herself by these assholes who were, can you say that in a library talk?
You did, yeah.
And she would be listening to them again. It never occurred to me that Trump might be elected. And who believed that? But what I was most worried about is that she would be surrounded once more with people like Sidney Blumenthal and others who were just guiding her, and she would listen to and make the wrong move. So I was more afraid of Hillary, who I took for granted would be elected, as the public figure that I lamented over, as opposed to the private Hillary, who I thought was an extraordinary human being.
Now, it was easy for you to have this kind of attitude because there was no question that Hillary was going to win, right?
I knew she was going to win. How could Trump win?
Yeah.
Who did win? I was away that year.
Now, this time around, you had no such feelings about, Trump winning. I mean, if Trump had won, we would be discussing the benefits of slavery now, right?
Well, I think Trump's admirers are already discussing the benefit. They have been discussing the benefits of slavery for 4 years. That's the problem. That this, I did a cartoon for the magazine Tablet on this about a year or so ago. That Trump represents a return of the Confederacy, and you saw the Confederate flag in the attack on the Capitol. And you see the Confederate flag in every Trump rally. It's not a metaphor. These people want to go back to the happy days of slavery. And although they were victims, and they don't acknowledge the fact that they wouldn't have had any power under slavery too. They wouldn't have been the masters. They would have been the field hands and the itinerant workers, the tenant farmers. But
the Confederacy has never really left us. I was always interested in your analysis of the Western movie, which is kind of, one way that Hollywood has kind of charted our history. And the Western movie has always been about the Confederate hero and the lost cause.
It was, I've always delighted in this because it's such an anomaly, and I've noted it and written and drawn about it in one of my graphic novels, and the Kill My Mother series of graphic novels that I did. I think the book called Cousin Joseph. But I know Molly Haskell, the brilliant critic, has written about it too. That in the Westerns, and I've always loved the Westerns, and I still love the Westerns. And in the middle of the night when I get out, I go to the Stars channel to turn on the Western. But in the Western, the Confederate soldiers who moved out west were the good guys, and the bad guys were always the former Union soldiers, who were the crooks, who ran the gambling halls, they were the bad guys. They weren't honorable. If you were a Southerner, you were honorable. This was the way it worked, and there was no problem for New Yorkers or Chicagoans or just about anybody else in the country with all of this, because it was just the West, and we didn't care what they, who the good guys and the bad guys were, and we had no problem with any of that. It's just that the Hollywood understood that to make a hero of a Yankee in the South was a no-no, and that the rest of the country didn't care. So that's what they did. There was a Confederate, there was an official Confederacy in Hollywood's making of Westerns, and everybody accepted it. And over again, you also saw in the textbooks, which were often, back when I was a kid and to this day, were published and written in Texas and published in Texas, that when I was in the Bronx in the in the late 1930s, we learned that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery, that it was a regional problem, between the North and the South. I often remember what the official explanation was, but at this moment when I'm on the air in front of you, I can't remember. But our education had less to do with education than it had to do with indoctrination. We Bronx Jews, we were given the story of slavery as having very little to do with the Civil War at all. And so much of the teaching that we got at that time, and from that matter, I suppose at this time, had to do with official points of view, points of indoctrination, that the teachers had to give us to learn. And when you raised the question in class, as I did from an early age and never stopped raising, you were considered a smartass. You weren't given an answer. There was no opening for discussion. It was just, you were a troublemaker. And I discovered that they were right. I was a troublemaker.
And then you became a professional troublemaker. And
it's a living.
Yeah, like tonight. So my question really is, so here is this New Deal baby, you don't go to college, you are not really plugged in politically, and you explode. You absolutely explode in my time in the late 50s and into the 60s as America's, in many ways, most savage political and social commentator. So what happened? Where did that happen? What gave you permission to start, using cartooning, as a way of poking America in the eye?
Well, as I saw it, first of all, everything you're talking about now was preceded by years. From the time I was in the Army, from 1951 to 1953, during the declining years of the Korean War, and beginning to find a direction I wanted to go into with my work. So the first 3 or 4 years out of the Army in 53 to 56, to late 56, where I figured out what I wanted to do and figured out kind of how to do it. And somebody's calling me. I have to get off the phone. I have to get. I'm sorry. Do I have the phone here?
I don't know where it is. It'll pick up.
Okay. Do I have the phone in my pocket? This is the organizational skills I show up in this house. I have nothing to do with age. It's what I've always had. In any case, I figured out after I left the Bronx, after I left my mother's house, after I left the care of the people who filled me with so much guilt because of my anger and my outrage, because they said they made me believe they meant the best for me. I was thrown into the Army, and then at the post Army, into a world of bureaucrats and others who freed me because I no longer had to feel guilt about betraying my family. And I could let emerge what I really felt and what I really thought, and it exploded. And it exploded at a time where Joe McCarthy was just over. The Army McCarthy hearings were, I believe, in '53, and that's after I got out of the Army. And suddenly we were in this post McCarthy period where where people were still afraid because of the McCarthy years to voice their opinions. They were afraid of their jobs. They were afraid of their futures. They were afraid of, and legitimately afraid. So people, and all the people I knew, all the college educated young people of my age, were quiet about all sorts of things that you don't talk about that. They don't want to get in trouble. They're afraid of losing their future. But I had no future. I had nothing to lose. I was not making a dime as a cartoonist. I couldn't sell any of my work. I couldn't, basically, I could afford to be dangerous because what were they going to do? Destroy a career I didn't have or get me in trouble? There was nothing anybody could do to me that I hadn't already done to myself. So by screwing up one way or the other. So I started increasingly doing these cartoons that would get me into trouble and nobody would publish them. And then I discovered the Village. It actually became clear from conversations with publishers, all of whom were very friendly, very nice. I went from one publisher to another. They loved to have me come around in order to reject me and tell me how good I was. But the problem was that I was too dangerous and that I wasn't famous. If I was famous, they could run me because then they could take a chance on somebody who was dangerous, who was famous. So they were telling me I had to get famous before I could get published. And then I happened to see copies of the Village Voice, which was a newspaper that had started about 6 or 7 months before. And as a last resort, I went to the publication and showed them my work. And that's how the story of my career began. The Voice said they would publish anything I did. And they did. And I started writing and drawing these things. And I understood that what I had to say in the context of those years was so radical that if I hammered it home and let my rage come to the fore, my anger, which was I had in full extent come to the fore, it would be simply masturbation. I wouldn't be making any points. I wouldn't be getting anywhere. I had to find a way of finding a form where I could have a discussion with the reader, where these arguments that I had to make seemed reasonable, seemed to come through. So I fiddled around and found in a sense, a form of dialogue that was a quiet and subtle advocacy, in which I would go from panel to panel, quietly leading the reader through questions, through attitudes, through one thing and another, to the conclusion that he or she didn't know I was coming to the last panel, and then I hit them. And it was all improvisation and all questioning, but all in a very quiet way, so that I found that I had opened a discussion that people weren't afraid of. I wasn't beating them over the head, and they started listening. And it was a form that was very much a part of my persona in any case, whether I knew it or not. And it worked. And it became a weekly, the Voice cartoons from October of 1956, when I began on, for the next 42 years or so, became my form of conversation with my readers.
Now
You know, that conversation has continued. yeah.
How you've sustained that anger though, after all these years? You've never mellowed. Would you agree with that?
I did mellow for a while. I think I it, it uh, uh, I mean, you go through all of these periods. It's hard to know, but I think there was a period where I kind of I think when I finally left The Voice, uh, I left because, well, actually, I got, fired by The Voice, or to try to put it another way. They wanted to run me, but not pay me anymore. So it was their pleasant way of firing me. But I was relieved to get fired because I thought I had become a hack by that time. I was no longer interested in what I was doing. I no longer thought I was making any kind of change. I had started to recycle cartoons I'd done 10 or 15 or 20 years earlier and redraw them, and was really pissed off at myself that I was doing that, but I didn't really care, and I was just putting in time. And when they got rid of me, um, because they said they could hire 2 or 3 reporters for what they were paying me, um, I was relieved. I mean, I wasn't relieved at first, but it turned out to be a form of liberation, and it was a wonderful time to get fired.
Sounds like you deserve to get fired.
I deserve to get fired. I've deserved everything that's ever happened to me.
Well, no, but
And
I don't know.
thank you for pointing that out.
Most of it has been pretty good. So maybe you don't. But in terms of, mellowing, I mean, the carnal knowledge, there was nothing mellow about that. Monroe, the little film that you won an Oscar for about a 4-year-old getting drafted, that was pretty savage stuff. Your plays have been tough. Your memoir beats up on a lot of people. And of course, Kill My Mother, it was a wonderful title for a graphic novel, but a little tough, maybe. So you still have that. I mean, do you feel a wellspring of anger when you look at television today? And, since, in the aftermath of January 6th, how do you respond to that? With anger, with amusement, with mellowness?
What are you trying to say?
I'm trying to get you
and
to
who
say.
are you? And what do you want from me?
I think you're still pissed off.
Oh, am I still pissed? Yes, I am still pissed off. But Bob, I think the difference is that I'm not what happens with age and what happens with
I wouldn't
life,
know about that.
yeah, and what happens with life is that the rage you feel stops being self-justifying. It becomes a condition that you discover clearly is going to be here all of your life, the injustices, but the injustices that are balanced often with hope and idealism and breakthroughs here and there, and that you can't deal it with personal pique any longer. You can't think of this as a personal betrayal. You're in a world that existed this way long before you and is going to go on existing long after you. And screw it, you better learn to live with it, because soon enough there'll be a time when you're living without it, and you don't want to rush that. And so the anger didn't really ever leave, or the rage didn't really leave. It was just my way of integrating it into the rest of my life where I could live with it. Um, and because what I didn't balance out when I was young and full of rage, uh, helped along with a drinking habit, which I loved in those years, but was lethal, um, was that that I had lovely children. I had a career that few people had, and I was going to continue to have, and I was doing exactly what I dreamed of doing when I was 4 years old. How many people live a life like that? You do, of course, but how many others? Just us two, and that that with all I had to complain about on a personal level, I was very, very lucky, and I remain very, very lucky. And because in my late years, I found myself in a wonderful relationship, and which turned into a wonderful marriage with Joan Holden. And I've got a great life, and I'm still screamingly mad at all sorts of things, but I can be, but even the screaming has to be within the background of a basic happiness with so many other things.
So how can you be happy in this
You don't want me to be
time?
happy?
Yeah, no. In this time of terrible turbulence, surrounded by a plague, which is kind of nibbling
Oh,
at our
that.
psyches. Huh?
Oh, that.
Oh, that.
Well, if you think this plague is bad, wait till the next plague.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, look at what you've come through all these years, and there was another side to it, right? You survived.
Well, yes, but I never, and there was a period I guess in the 60s, early 60s, when I thought about survival as something quite wonderful. Now I think the whole point of survival is not very interesting. It's not surviving what's awful. It's making something out of what it's really cornball. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved the popular songs of the period. And I love those dumb Bing Crosby lyrics. Would you like to swing on a star? The best things in life are free. The songs of idiotic hope, all of which, because I'm a child of Hollywood dreams and all of the romance stuff that I learned from popular forms of entertainment as a kid, and still learning about from these days. I learned to have that sentimental attachment to Never Never Land, which I still potentially believe in. And you can't not believe in it and still believe in the American dream. And the American dream is a Never Never Land. And so I've often talked about this. It's the forms, a lot of my idealism, much of it, maybe most of it, comes out of the forms of mass entertainment that were prevalent when I was a kid. That during the height of the Great Depression, we got coast-to-coast radio for the first time, so the entire country could listen to Jack Benny and Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, and they made up a national sense of humor, along with Amos and Andy, of course, so these things have to be balanced off, but. Sound movies came in, and the musical comedies. All of this created, in the height of a depression, a spirit of optimism and survival. That the entertainment was so endearing and so idyllic that people believed, I can have a piece of this. I will enter this. I will. When I was a kid going to those movies, I would say, someday I will end up in a penthouse with George and Ira Gershwin and Mickey and Judy, and I would live that kind of life, and and dancing on top of the piano, and the combination of dumb fantasy that mixed with reality, which mixed with uh, later with Tolstoy uh, and Flaubert and novelists who made you think. All of that became this hodgepodge, which helped move me one way or another, but always
Yeah, but
optimistic.
I mean, in some way, you were betrayed by that. I mean, you were manipulated by mass entertainment. I mean, whatever happened to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington? That was a fraud, right?
Whatever I didn't hear that. Whatever happened? What?
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yeah. Well,
That
we
was
know
a
what
fraud.
happened with Mr. Smith.
I'm
He
sure you believed in it.
filibustered until he finished, and then the wonderful Claude Rains shot himself.
Mhm.
It's which he should never have done, and yet Claude Rains, after shooting himself, a few years later walks off with Rick in Casablanca and says and Rick says this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. So, what goes around comes around.
Speaking of Casablanca, what
Again?
brought you to Casablanca?
Yeah.
Or Shelter Island? Why are you here? Why aren't you in the Hamptons with all your literary friends?
I'm here with my favorite literary friend, Robert Lipsyte. Schmuck.
Okay, I'll accept that. So, did Biden come too late for us?
What's too late for us? I didn't hear it.
President Biden and Kamala Harris, did they come too late
No, I
for
think
us?
they've done too late. They came along at the right time. The combination of the two is what makes me believe in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Frank Capra all over again.
Mhm.
The odd combination of Biden, this over-the-hill politician who was done for, and this, but who has great integrity and great charm and a kind of integrity that reeks out of him. And there were endless things in Biden's career I've disagreed with, going back to Anita Hill and all of that. But the combination of Biden and Kamala Harris, was the first mixed Black woman to become vice president of the United States, and with such intelligence and charm and glints of humor, with a Jewish husband of all things, and called by her family Mamala. It's just, if this is not the Hollywood version, I don't know what it is. And I've always gotten along with the Hollywood version. So I have great hopes for I will, as the next year and a half goes on, and 2 years, if I'm around, I will certainly have my differences and rage and anger at them and all of that. But I think the hope of the country and the miracle of the country is its insistence, no matter how no matter how bad things get, to somehow reinvent itself and insist, as it goes down for the third time, that it ain't over yet, baby, and comes out again and surprises us all. And of course, that's what I've always seen from the time I was a kid as the American experiment. Somehow we do that. And we seem to be, or I hope we seem to be doing that again. I mean, watching this idiocy of Trump's defense on television today, and the insult to our intelligence of all of that and all of these people, but there they are, and they've always been there, and they always will be there. And it is our job to deal with them and get rid of them. And you have to stick around to do that, and you have to do it with some calm and some humor, because if you don't have the humor, there's a danger of becoming one of them.
Well, the humor is your job. What should we be doing?
What should we be doing?
What should we be doing? You do the humor, we'll do the rest.
I'm telling anybody what to be doing. I know what I'm doing. I'm drawing my pictures. I'm writing my stories. I'm in the midst of a graphic novel for a two-part graphic novel that I hope to have finished in the next couple of months, but I hope to have finished a couple of months ago, so who knows? But I'm having, to my surprise and delight, I'm having enormous fun with my work. I'm suffering now from macular degeneration, which means I can see you not too clearly, and when the work on my drawing table, I can't see too clearly, and I see that for some reason or other as a kind of joyous contest with myself to see how long I can get away with this,
Mm-hmm.
as the half-blind cartoonist. And I don't find anything to lament over. I just find it an interesting game, because when you get to be my age and you're still functioning, you really have no right to complain about anything.
Well, I think looking at macular degeneration as a jolly challenge, I think is a wonderful jumping off place to dealing with America as it is today. My wife, Lois, has often talked about the real job that we have as citizens now is to find common ground, to find some place where we can meet and talk, even with the people that you talked about who have, come out of the closet in their repressed anger. Do you think that's possible?
Well, I think I love Lois, but I think common ground is in a country so as devoted to holding on to racism as long as we have, is going to take many, many years before we find it. And what we are moving for, I mean, the Trumpism is the last scream of whites only, in a country that's changing into brown and black and yellow, and whites will be minority. Now, Jesus, these people are going to go down screaming and are going down screaming, but that's where it's happening. And so it's going to take a long time. But this has essentially been a stark racist country from its earliest roots, and it ain't going to give it up. So that battle is going to go on and on and on and on. And as Trump says, you know it and I know it.
Yeah.
And the only thing I hope won't go on and on is Trump himself, who
we'll
deserves
see.
whatever bad things can happen to him. And I hope, and I look forward to him being in a Georgia jail within the next year or so.
I don't know. I think I should let people ask questions. I know there are some questions, but what were your feelings? My last question. What were your feelings on January 6th? The watching that attack on the Capitol. I mean, this was something new. This was something different. This was something you had not seen before. What was your reaction?
I don't think my feelings are any more interesting than any other Americans, which is this cannot be happening. This this was, as I said, I lived through the Depression. I lived through September 11th, 9/11. I lived through endless awful things, McCarthyism and all of it. And I've never dreamed, whoever dreamed, no one, that I would ever see anything like this before. And I saw all of this unimaginable horror happening in front of my eyes on television, with the approval, the giggling's approval of the President of the United States. And as we see, if you watch television today, and the Defense Network, the continued approval of the worst people in the country. And it's going on. And that, we have to live through this and get through it, and we will. But it shows you what the dark neither side of the American character is. It's, the other side of the American dream is the American nightmare, and that's what these people represent, and they ain't going away.
They ain't going away.
They ain't going away.
They've been here the whole time.
They've been running the show for some of the time. And then starting with Theodore Roosevelt and then FDR, they lost the argument, and they've been trying to win back the argument. I mean, these are people who've been trying to repeal the New Deal from 1932 on, and all of the things that came from the New Deal, and that's been one of the struggles and one of the battles, and it's going to continue. And if Biden and Harris have the most successful 4 years one can imagine, and we deal with the pandemic with the alacrity we all hope, if all of these things come true, they're still waiting out there to stop, to once again perform their nightmare. And they'll always be out there.
Well, so will we.
Yes,
Madam Lucas.
Yes, and that's got to be understood that this is a struggle, and so make it as much as one can a happy struggle, and take pleasure in the fact that that more times than not these bastards lose.
Okay, this has been a great conversation, but we have a couple of questions to interrupt you with. So this is from, let's see, Ted Clark. Young people are now canceling some heroes that most people our age do still revere, Abe Lincoln, etc. How do you put people who were great but flawed by today's standards in perspective?
You mean Abe Lincoln was flawed?
Apparently.
It's first of all, I wasn't aware that young people were canceling Abe Lincoln because he was flawed. If I knew Abe Lincoln was flawed, I'd cancel him too. It's that lousy Lincoln. Jesus, I'm glad we got him out of the way. Who else can we get out of the way? I think young people, this is what older people always used to tell me when I was too outrageous. You'll learn.
Oh, I like that.
Wait till you're a grandparent.
Okay, so we have a question from Charity. Do you believe that Donald Trump has more damage to do? Does Trump's connection to Roy Cohn, who I believe is a distant relative of yours, tell us anything about what to expect from him next?
I didn't hear, I heard the lovely name of Roy Cohn, cousin Roy, but I didn't hear what it was connected to. But it's interesting that Trump. Joan, can you quiet that down?
Yes, sir.
That Trump, with his long record of racism and discrete anti-Semitism, his life has been shaped by my distant cousin Roy, who taught him the tactics that he's lived by all of his life, and I forget where I was going with that, but in any case.
Well, Charity wanted to know, do you think that Trump has more damage to do? Do you think he's still a danger?
Oh, God, is he still a danger?
Yeah. Does he have more damage to do?
I think he has damaged me. He's damaged this country, and long after he's dead, he will be a danger. That he will become an icon for the far right. Trump is this is a bully who never did a thing on his own, and he's fascist America's white dream. So he'll go on. He'll go on.
Okay. I'm going to unmute Edwin Heidemann, who wants to ask a question. So Edwin, I hope you're there. I'm unmuting you right now.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Edwin.
Yes. Hello. Mr. Feiffer, I have a fairly benign question for you. In what I've read of your history, I read very little about Martha's Vineyard. And I remember distinctly in the late 60s and early 70s, picking up your rubbish in Lambert's Cove. And you had a charming little studio attached to a house there.
That's right.
I enjoyed visiting and looking over your disposed cartoons. And my friend and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I've always hoped to meet you in person someday. So 50 years later, here I am.
Well, the vineyard years were years I treasured. I summered there, and summered is a general term because I went up in May or June, or depending on children's education. You know, that the children, where the children had to be was where that decided where I was in those years. And but I went up as early as I could, stayed as late as I could, had some wonderful friendships that affected my life for all time, and people I cherish, and most of them are gone now.
Yeah.
And but I have a daughter, wonderful. Kate, my oldest daughter, still lives in the vineyard, and with her husband Chris and her daughter Maddie, and my granddaughter, and it was some of the most exciting experiences I had, and wonderful experiences I had, were in those vineyard years, and I regret that they're over. But I love where I am now.
Thank you.
Okay, I have two more questions. Let's see, one is from Ralph Kava, who said, who made a bigger impression on you, Will Eisner, Robert Altman, Mike Nichols, or anybody else?
Oh, well, I think without a doubt, it was Will Eisner, who was my hero when I was a kid. and remains a hero to me now. I mean, I first became aware of his work when I was, I guess, 6 or 7, and followed him and imitated him and wanted to be him. And I wasn't him, but working with him as his assistant and finally graduating into writing the spirit, his wonderful feature, and was an invaluable growing period. He and I fought a lot, but we liked each other, and we had a wonderful time together. Just a few months or two before he died, when he came to Washington D.C. to see my last play, A Bad Friend, and he was on a panel afterwards, and we had dinner afterwards, and we had a wonderful time with each other. And about 2 months later, he was dead, which shocked me because he seemed in such great shape. But a word about Mike Nichols. He was, I will never stop mourning Mike. He was just a sensibility and just a remarkable talent and a remarkable combination of so many things. And I was very fortunate that we got together when he and Elaine were just beginning. I mean, shortly after they had their early successes. And we knew each other so many years through so much. And he did extraordinary work on the plays and the film Carnal Knowledge that we worked on. And I think of him a lot to this day. And I have on my saved on television, whatever they show of Mike's work, I record and I keep and look at from time to time. He will always be in my life.
Wonderful. Okay, I don't want to be greedy with your time, but I have a few more questions. So you're up for a couple more questions? Okay, so this one is...
Did we get rid of Lipsyte?
Nope, he's still here.
Oh, damn.
He's hanging in here. What is your most vivid memory of growing up in the Bronx?
Getting out.
That was a good, quick answer. Okay, I have 2 more questions, and then we're going to let you go. What play or 2 do you think is ripe for revival at this cultural moment in time?
Well, I'm surprised that nobody's wanted to do Little Murders again, which I think is as timely now, perhaps more timely than when it was first done. And I would hope for a revival. One of my favorite plays, done in the 70s, I guess, that I've written was Knock Knock. And then I did an updated version of it a few years ago because somebody was interested and it didn't work out. But my friend Elliot Gould, who was started in the play of Little Murders and the movie, asked to see it, and I hope Elliot likes it and wants to do something with it. But I'd love to see that done again. On the other hand, I'd love to see all of them. Harris Yulin here in the Hamptons did a reading of the last play I had done on Lincoln Center about a family of Jewish communists in Brooklyn in the 50s called A Bad Friend. And I think it did a beautiful job. And I'd love to see Harris or somebody else do that.
Okay. Here's our last one, and then I'm going to let everybody go for the evening. You spoke about how the youth are the hope for the future. You said you've seen good from them already. Any advice for them going forward? This is from Lucille, who works with young people. How do they get their voices heard?
Well, you don't get your voices heard. You just keep going at it until, because nobody wants to hear your voices. So it's up to you to make yourself heard. It's not, nobody gives anybody permission. You take permission. And you understand that rejection and disappointment and denial of who you are and your identity and your, in some cases, your right to exist is just out there. And it's part of the air you breathe. And you have to go along with that and just dismiss it as the detritus of life. It's always going to be there. If you have anything different to say, it's always going to be rejected, unless you're insanely lucky. And you just go on going on. That's it. That's what it. And to the extent you can, enjoy the fray, enjoy the combat. I learned to, and understand that things, you give it time and things have a way of working out. And one just has to hope and hope and hope and hope and hope against all of the odds.
Well, that's a wonderful way to end. I can't tell you what a great night it's been. I know that we've gotten a lot of lovely comments in the chat. So I want to thank you, Jules Feiffer, and thank you, Robert Lipsyte. You've given us a really wonderful Friday night, and we hope to see you running around the library one of these days soon.
Well, I would love to, and I hope things open up so I can do that. And a final word about Bob. We have a regular Sunday morning breakfast together, and which is one of the reasons that I can go on. He's a wonderful friend and a wonderful writer and a great human being, and I will never leave him alone.
Good.
Just
Okay.
keep cooking. That's all I ask. Just keep cooking those eggs.
I haven't seen you smile like that all night. All I have to do is lie about you and let's see what happens.
All right, gentlemen, have a good evening, and thank you again for agreeing to give us your time.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you
care.
for making, as Yogi Berra would say, thank you for making this necessary.
All right, with that,
On that
I'm gonna
note,
say good night.
good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.